40 Acres and Maybe a Mule, Chapter 15. In the dark, under a clear, moonless sky, people stepped up to a table and agreed to a work contract. A white man wrote while moths sizzled flying into the flames of his lantern. Gladness's work contract read, said Gladness City agrees to work for said Gideon City for 1 year from the 14th day of July 1865 until the 14th day of July 1866 at any kind of labor, said Gideon City directs, and agrees to serve him faithfully and constantly. If such labor be faithfully performed, said Gideon City, on his part agrees to furnish quarters and food and to pay $24 at the end of 1 year's service. Should said Gladness City be insolent, imprudent, or sassy to Gideon City, or be idle or sick more than 2 days, she is subject to discharge and shall forfeit all rights between parties, signed in the presence of. And the man wrote his name. Gladness signed her name. Gideon was breathing in hot gasps. Pascal kept whispering, "It's all right, Gideon. Our contracts be to you. Think of the people who got to work for the white masters again." Gideon's turn came. Pascal squeezed his arm. "Your name?" "Gideon City." The man stared at his paper and then stared up at Gideon. He frowned and wrote, "Gideon City has title to Sherman land, 40 acres. Pascal trudged his brother's arm. When Gideon took the papers and walked away without saying anything, Pascal almost fainted in relief. 2 people in the line behind them began to wail. They called, "But we were here for Union's Club's meeting." "Sorry, y'all just signed a work contract with Mr. Howard, and your work begins now," the man said. Mr. Howard swaggered over, carrying a rifle in both hands. "Are y'all being imprudent?" he said. "No, sir," the man said. He and the woman looked down. "Well, then, y'all climb into the back of that wagon." Pascal moaned. Freed slaves were losing their freedom. Little by little, they must have felt good about themselves that summer. Now they were back to working like slaves. No worse than slaves, they were being arrested and had to work on their farms, work their fines like prisoners. This was wrong, wrong, wrong. Why wouldn't they have jobs that paid them? Walls of Jericho. He watched people climb into the wagon. With a nod, Gideon, Mr. Friedman, and 5 hired men disappeared in the direction of the wagon. Nellie and Pascal looked away. When they returned, Gideon wiped a smile from his face. Pascal wondered what they had done. Soon people gathered for Union League Club meeting. Mr. McPherson, the Republican organizer, stepped up in a box on the street and introduced the captain of the Union Army. Mr. McPherson was a busy man, thought Pascal, organizing on both sides of the savannah. The captain shouted, "We planned parades for the 4th of July, but we were fired on." He waved his arms. "Maybe the South hasn't learned. The war is over and they lost." Everyone cheered loudly, but Pascal remembered when some colored people were even afraid to clap because he felt jittery. He took Nellie's hand and worked his way out of the crowd. He never liked being inside. Gideon and Mr. Friedman noticed them and followed. Soon they were sitting with their hired workers on the wooden sidewalk by the school. The evening air cooled and a breeze shook leaves on a nearby tree. The rustling leaves bothered Pascal. He saw Gideon began to fidget too. He bet Gideon was worried about the farm. The captain's speech went on and on. They were punishing the wealthy plantation owners and the top officers of the Confederacy. Pascal wondered if that wouldn't make them angry. He felt hairs rise on the nape of his neck. When Mr. McPherson climbed back on the box, he pointed to the lines of people still signing up for work contracts. "In Congress, Republicans will kill those black codes." The cheers were softer. "The South," he said, "wants to reverse Reconstruction with a redemptionist policy. We won't let them, will we?" "Oh, Lordy," a woman called. "The masters will get us back any way they can." Pascal shredded. That was true. New laws were taking them backward. The first wagon pulled away, loaded with sobbing colored people clinging to each other. When Pascal stood, he saw loose wheels on the wagon wobble. Now he knew what Gideon and the men had done. He wondered how long before the wagon would break down. Could the colored people escape? "For all of you on Sherman lands," Mr. McPherson yelled in a raspy voice, "good news. In Circular 13, you'll have the rights to your 40 acres. Gideon cheered, but Pascal shook Gideon's arm for an explanation. At first, Gideon whispered, General Sherman be giving out land to get rid of slaves following his troops. He just told folks to take land and begin farming. Now they done written it up as a right. Gideon's smile made Pascal feel better. He looked up at the stars and whispered, Thank you, Lord. But in the west, he saw a glow. He pointed and called, Look, y'all. What's that over there? Yonder. The crowd stirred. Other people called out and stared. Suddenly, the glow began brighter and reflecting off a wandering cloud. They were burning Jubilee Town, a woman screamed. The shout went up. Burning Jubilee Town? A man pushed Mr. McPherson off the box. He shouted, Yes, the town and your lands are burning. That'll teach you all a lesson. Go back to your masters. He shook a fist. Go back. Pascal remembered him from the road in South Carolina. He and the older man had been the night riders. What was he doing here in Georgia? It seemed the masters were closing in on them, trapping them. Pascal, standing by the school, smelled smoke behind him. Yellow flames began to crackle and pop inside the storefront. The school shimmered in a heat puff and then burst into yellow tongues of fire. Pascal saw a white man walk away with a kerosene can. He yelled, No, 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 and shook his fist at that man. They were losing everything. Colored people were being carried back into slavery, and their school was going up in flames. Nellie began twisting her braids. Gideon stood and shouted, Stop it! Stop! Pascal caught Gideon's shirt tail to keep him from chasing the man who had set the school on fire. The hired men backed away. The women wrung their hands and moaned. Mr. Friedman caught Pascal, Nellie, and Gideon and dragged them away. Soon they were all running from the schoolhouse fire. Gideon called, What's happened to our 40 acres? Oh, Lord!